What we're now going to do is shift our attention to the second of the three STX related tools, and that's what's appearing here in this subgraph or pane underneath the price action. This is the component 4 line, and I want us to take a look here briefly at the kind of things that it can provide us in terms of information as well. What I want you to primarily note is that there are 3 oscillators associated with it. A fast, and that's shown in this greenish type color. Obviously it's the quicker to respond of the 3. And there's a medium speed line then shown in orange, and finally there is a slowest line shown in the cyan color. It's called the component 4 line, you might ask, seeing only 3 oscillators, how is it the component 4 line? The reason for that is that the 0 line itself, that is the horizontal black line here, can also come into play, thus in effect creating the 4th line. Note also that 2 of the oscillators, that is the fast one to respond in the greenish color, as well as the orange one, what we would consider the medium speed oscillator, both have their own set of standard deviation bands that surround them. And what we can see is that the greenish line has an upper standard deviation band in the same greenish color, as well as a lower standard deviation band, which too is in the same color. And just as was the case there, the same thing is true of the medium speed oscillator, the orange one here, in that it has both a lower standard deviation band as shown at this point and an upper standard deviation band here. By keeping these plots in the same color, I think it's much easier to identify which standard deviation band belongs to which oscillator. Alright, let's first discuss the movements of the oscillators and how they might interact. As was the case with the triple STX, note that, of course, they do move at different speeds, and therefore they offer patterns like fans and conjunctions, just like the triple STX did as well, which is the reason that we spent so much time trying to understand what the appearance of that fan and or conjunction formation looks like. However, it's important to note that since the math is different for these 3 oscillators that make up the component 4 line than was the case with the triple STX, the fans and conjunctions may or may not occur at identical locations, but they offer yet another means of market analysis. And, of course, since the 0 line constitutes that quasi-4th line, it too can be an element in the identification of the conjunction formations. The first of the important patterns related to the component 4 line that we'll discuss will be the fan. Okay, pertaining to this fan formation, the first thing that we want to take notice of is the position of the oscillators relative to one another. That is, are the oscillators stacked in a bearish configuration, that is, with the fast below the medium, which in turn is below the slow, or conversely, has there been a crossover, and is the fast residing above the medium, which in turn is residing above the slow? In, of course, the bullish phase, the fast line will be stacked above the medium, as it is here, which in turn then will be positioned above the slow. Also note that in this bullish market phase, they'll generally be positioned above the 0 horizontal line as well. Now, of course, in the early stages of a bullish move, after a deep move to the downside, they're going to be buried at very negative values, so there's going to be a process involved where they climb out of that. Just was the case up here. You had excessively high values for the oscillators in this bullish phase, and it took them a while to cross the 0 line, this horizontal black line. And obviously the positions relative to one another and to the 0 line are critically important in terms of your understanding of how this oscillator is to be read and utilized. The fast line, of course, is very sensitive to price, as you can see, and can turn rapidly and cross through either the medium or slow lines, or for that matter, even the 0 line as well, very quickly. The medium speed line, of course, is a little less responsive to small price changes, yet it too captures the essence of what price action is doing. And the third oscillator, that is the cyan oscillator, which is labeled STX1, is the slowest of the 3 lines and can be thought of as a deep-level primary trend identifier when being compared to the 0 line. That is, note that in this phase, beginning at the far left-hand side of this chart window, The slowest line was clearly well above the zero line, remained dominant to that extent up until the point where basically it crossed the zero line and turned negative, and remained firmly established below the zero line until the market then ended its bottoming and congestion phase here, and then finally cut back to the upside. So if the slow line remains above zero, as the fast and possibly the medium lines oscillate around it, then it's indicative of an underlying bullish trend, as would be the case throughout this period right here. And you have to remember then that the fast and medium oscillations, that is the fast oscillator and medium oscillator, are merely identifying counter-trend retracements against this primary bullish trend. And of course these definitions would be reversed in a downtrend, as is the case here. That is, the slow line less than zero and the fast and medium line oscillations around it signifying counter-trend retracements against the primary bearish downtrend. In addition to the simple fans that the three lines are generating and their positions relative to the zero line, in effect the fourth line, the standard deviation bands related to the fast and medium term oscillators offer a very powerful measurement of the degree of overbought or oversold that the underlying market may be exhibiting. The fast line will usually be the quickest to exceed its upper or lower standard deviation band, and may do so repeatedly, as in this process right here, throughout a primary bullish or bearish market move. Somewhat delayed and less frequent, the medium speed line, shown here in orange, is also likely to exceed its upper or lower standard deviation band as well, often signifying an even more significant degree of overbought or oversold. Note that since the study contains the slow oscillator as well as the zero line, we now have even a more quantifiable means of discussion of the possible permutations of overbought or oversold conditions of the market. When the slow line is positioned above zero, as was the case through this phase right here, indicating a primary bullish trend, and the fast or medium oscillators exceed their respective lower standard deviation band, which was true here. Notice that the fast is below its standard deviation lower band, and the orange, medium speed, is also below its lower standard deviation band. It's usually indicative of a termination zone of a short-term counter-trend reaction. This is even more true if the lower standard deviation bands of either the fast or medium oscillators are being violated while at or near the zero line from above. And this was a classic illustration of the fact that the fast oscillator had been well above zero here, came down to the zero line, was below its lower standard deviation band, yet the slowest oscillator within a component 4 line was well above the zero line, and the market turned from there. And by the way, we had confirmation of this coming from the information that we had learned in our analysis of the STX, and even in this case, the NMA itself. Of course, these rules would be reversed for environments of primary degree bearish trends, where the slow line remains below zero, as is the case right here, and the fast or medium lines achieve overbought status by virtue of violating their respective upper standard deviation bands while at or near the zero line from below, as the counter-trend move exhausts itself. Here's a case where that is true. Clearly the slow oscillator is below zero. The fast oscillator has rallied off of a low point, come back, and is achieving overbought by virtue of being above its upper standard deviation band, yet in a primary degree bearish climate, as defined by the location of the slow oscillator relative to the zero line. Note also that at the same time, the medium speed orange line has done exactly the same thing. That is, it has rallied back. You can follow the orange upper SD band. It too has rallied right back into that at the same time that they're all coming into something else that we'll be discussing later, which is a conjunction. In an ideal perfect world, this would have been even more glaringly tradable had it been occurring near the zero line. But I would not let that deter you from taking a trade at a location like this.